For our 10-year wedding anniversary, my ex-wife surprised me with divorce papers. For A Link Between Worlds' 10-year anniversary, Nintendo surprised us with the same game we received in 2018, except this time Link has a really strong hand that he's able to masterfully bait enemies with. Now, my memory's not the same after I tried to see if pulling a horse's tail would make it go faster, but I do remember that A Link Between Worlds was my third favorite game of 2013 behind The Last of Us and Assassin's Creed Black Flag. I also recall that it was fun and well made, albeit fairly easy, and you could make yourself super skinny just like my ex-wife was when we first started dating. Let me tell you something, A Link Between Worlds gets off to a fantastic start. Within the first 10 minutes, you're going through a dungeon using your sword and a secondary item, and you're even introduced to the big bad, who spanks you harder than Mistress Paddlebottom when I give her an extra $100. Then you wake up next to a creepy furry, is there any other kind, and the adventure truly begins. Unlike certain other Zelda games that take forever to get going, this one drops you straight into the action. And perhaps the greatest feat belonged to Margot Robbie. I also liked how snappy the dialogue was. There's very little wastage, and it's even surprisingly humorous. From that point on, Zelda slips into this awesome groove where I found myself loving all of the quality of life improvements. I've played a lot of Zelda games in my time, including Oracle of Seasons earlier this year, and some of them have nagging issues that detract from the fun, like when a hot girl won't stop talking about her feelings. But Between Worlds does away with many of these annoyances. Now you don't have to worry about ammo. Things like arrows are tied to your magic meter, which refills automatically. And I cannot tell you how amazing it is to have the map on the bottom screen. Being able to just look down at my magnificent toes is almost as good as being able to look down and see the fully detailed dungeon map. It removes the need to constantly whip it out from the menu. Same with items. The touchscreen makes it so much easier to select them. I know this isn't anything new to the millions who played Ocarina of Time or Majora's Mask on 3DS, or the dozens of people who played a Zelda game on Wii U, but it still deserves to be mentioned. While there are those quality of life improvements, not everything is as rosy as your mom's cheeks after I clap them. A Link Between Worlds is far too easy. The developers tried to add some risk to the experience by having the furry take back all of your rented items when you die, but barring being a buffoon, that won't really ever happen. Speaking of the item rental feature, I completely forgot this existed going in. Inspired by Blockbuster's super successful business strategy, Between Two Ferns allows you to pay a small fee to rent any of the items you'd normally unlock inside a dungeon. Just like renting a woman, it makes the experience far too easy, but overall it's handled really well. You can have literally everything you need after the first dungeon, and it's up to you how you move forward. But even if you decide to go one item at a time, the fast travel feature is handled so well that it's not a big deal going from one end of the map to the other. You literally just tap a button, a witch who looks like my former mother-in-law appears, and she takes you to any previously visited weather vane. It eliminates all that mindless backtracking, which I'm not a fan of. And the witch actually has a snarky personality, which earns the game bonus points. But the best part about any Zelda game, well, except for the two most recent ones, are the dungeons. Between Worlds' game design is impeccable. Take the second dungeon, Tower of Hera, for example. The entire dungeon is themed around whacking things with your mighty hammer. Need to jump to the next floor? Flatten a giant rubber, then have it fling you up. Need to kill a spiny turtle thing from Mario? Smash it with the hammer. Need to break a hole in the ground? Hammer time, baby! The developers don't haphazardly use the various items, they make them the main focus of each dungeon. And what about the big gimmick this time around? No, not Link seemingly being able to talk. I mean merging with walls, which is actually used a lot more smartlier than you may recall. Obstacles here are specifically designed to make you go into the walls. Traveling on an automatic block, they'll put a wall in your way which you have to merge into to prevent yourself from falling into lava. It's the same thing with gigantic balls coming in your face. Instead of those balls making you flatter than my ex-wife's butt, you can dodge them by merging. It's not all peaches and foot lotion though. That particular dungeon ends with one of the easiest boss fights in Zelda history. Seriously, you just hit a big glowing red ball on a snake thing's tail, all while it moves around in the most non-threatening way possible. Then there's the next dungeon, House of Gales, which utilizes the tornado rod. You'll use your rod to glide across the map thanks to some wind turbines that go...
You know, the thing makes it so... And of course, it's like a graveyard for birds.
Fly up to a moving platform and extinguish the flames of enemies and obstacles. Then the final boss is a Beyblade who tries to bump you off the stage, so you have to fly up and stab it in the eye a bunch of times. I could go on and on about how superbly executed Between Worlds' dungeon design is, but to sum it up quickly, unlike my dog when I toss him a treat, it does not miss. A Link Between Worlds follows the classic Zelda formula of, oh, you know how those first few dungeons were amazing and you were happy just to end the experience there? Yeah, those were the appetizer, and now we're going to feed you the main course. I will be spoiling the final dungeon in a minute, but to keep things as vague as possible right now, let's just say some shenanigans happen and you end up in Lorule, where Princess Hilda saves you, but only because she needs you to do something for her. Typical. Link thinks he's getting a vacation in a foreign land only for a princess to tell him he needs to save the sages or whatever so both worlds don't fall into darkness or whatever. Doesn't he deserve a break? Anyways, Lorule isn't just a carbon copy of Hyrule. Okay, well it kind of is, but Lorule is a much nastier place. The people are all jerks, and there's monsters running around everywhere. It's kind of like moving from a bright, happy place like Los Angeles, only to end up in a dreary place like New Jersey. It adds more dungeons to fight through, and the first one I bested, Thieves' Hideout, featured an escort mission that surprisingly didn't suck, as well as a clever boss fight where you had to merge into their shield to hide, wait until they got confused, then attack them. It's sort of like that internet thing where people vanish under a blanket in front of their dog. Except when I did it to my dog, he just assumed he was alone and started humping my Lopunny plushie. Thankfully, the game does get a bit tougher towards the end. In the Fire Temple, aptly called Turtle Rock, the final boss is a volcanic turtle that I'm surprised isn't a Pokemon. This guy seems easy at first, but then it hops up and you have to dodge its deep, gaping mouth, as well as its rapid spinning and kabooming. So while A Link Between Worlds is overall an easy game, there are a few sections where you'll be tested. It all then culminates in the final dungeon, Lorule Castle. Because it lacks any sort of theme, it's merely okay compared to the others. You basically just go through a few puzzle rooms using a few different items, rebattle a few bosses, then it's time to face Yugi Moto, the king of games, before he sends you to the Shadow Realm. In true form, the boss fight is fairly easy. I will say that the first part is somewhat difficult, though your items make it a breeze. And the second part just sees you playing ping pong with Yuga 3 times and then shooting him with 2D arrows. It's a massively disappointing end to such an amazing game. Regardless of the ease, just like a foot massage, I wished it didn't have to end. Now, I know what you're thinking. How do the Urukai know what a menu is? And you're wrong. The reason I'm mostly using other people's footage isn't because I don't have a capture carded 3DS. The reason is that I got too into the game and forgot to record my own footage. Also, it's a less good experience playing with the 3DS in my crotch while I stare at the game on my monitor. You'd think the bigger screen would improve the experience, but after decades of craning my neck down to look at a handheld, and down at my toes when I wear sandals, staring directly forward feels unnatural. So all of this leads me to my final question. Why is it called The Legend of Zelda and not The Legend of Link? I mean, you play as Link, not Zelda. Also, should you buy a 3DS just to play A Link Between Worlds a decade later? If you've never played it and yearn for the days of old school Zelda, 100%. Otherwise, put an ad on Craigslist saying you want to go to someone's house and use their 3DS for 10 to 12 hours. And in lieu of payment, you'll just be barefoot the whole time. It worked for me when I wanted to replay Super Mario 3D Land recently, though I did use a picture of my ex-wife's feet when they asked for one. Still, I didn't hear any complaints once I arrived and took my socks off. All in all, even 10 years later, I would give A Link Between Worlds a 9 out of 10. The dungeons are amazing and the Zelda gameplay is as good as it gets, but a lot of the bosses are far too easy, which keeps it from being a 10.